Congratulations! You've taught that naughty king a lesson and have returned all the stolen food back to the people of Dreamland. Watch the credits roll, relax, and wait a couple of years before you replay the game. Is what I would say if it weren't for something called Extra Mode. Thought Kirby's Dream Land was easy? Now replay the whole game with more sporadic enemies and even tougher and crazier boss fights. Oh cool, you've done that one too? Alright, fine, make your own difficulty then. Starting on Kirby's Adventure and onwards, there's an additional mode after completing the game, where the challenge is to beat every boss in a row. These two basic elements, and then some, help establish the post-game formula that we enjoy today. Of course though, these post-game modes aren't perfect. For a good chunk of the early titles, to even access these extra modes, you need to have 100%ed the story mode first. With certain games, the road to completion can be tedious at best, and just not worth it at worst. Heck, most of the time the only post-game mode is just a boss rush, and even then, they just force you into fights without grabbing any abilities first. It took until Superstar for boss rushes, soon to be called arenas in modern games, to not only be more fun with the use of abilities, but just be more accessible overall with the addition of rest areas. Beginning in the Kirby's Adventure remake, Nightmare in Dreamland, is the addition of a soon-to-be mainstay for the modern Kirby games. A new mode where you beat the game as fast as possible as someone other than Kirby. In Nightmare's case, it's Metaknightmare. In execution, it's basically just extra mode, but you play as Meta Knight, and the game's final boss is mysteriously absent. But this simple mode will influence the future of Kirby PostGame. 6 years later, in the remake Superstar Ultra, Metaknightmare makes its return. Staying in line with its time attack roots, you play the entire main story of the game as Meta Knight. To spice up gameplay, as you defeat many enemies, you earn points. With enough points, you can activate one of 4 new abilities to help you on your speedrun journey. This change in gameplay seemed like enough, and it made replaying levels quite fun. But there's more. Once you get to the end of the game, instead of experiencing the betrayal of Marks once again, instead, Meta Knight wishes to fight a challenger to prove his strength, Galactonite. This boss is incredibly tough as heck, and like the time attack modes they debuted in, Galactonite will become a mainstay in the Kirby postgame. Also introduced in Ultra, alternate boss forms. You see, in prior Kirby games, if there ever was a mode where you play a harder version of the story, it pretty much only affected Kirby. The only exception to this was the first game, as explained earlier. Seemingly taking inspiration from the original extra mode, we got Revenge of the King, a short reimagining of that mode. Not only do bosses have different, harder attacks than the originals, but they look and are named differently as well. Along the way, we even got added bosses exclusive to this mode, that being Coppola, a different cast of mid-bosses, and the toughest boss of all time. Okay, maybe next time, buddy. There's a second version of the arena called Helper the Hero. It plays basically the same as the original arena, albeit with fewer bosses and healing items. Oh, and you're stuck to a single ability the whole time with no way of losing it. What I like about this mode is the simple fact that every helper gets their own time score to themselves, and a medal as well. Not only does this encourage players to play as every helper in this mode, but it also gives players a little more incentive to challenge themselves with a specific ability. I really wish this feature was kept in later Kirby titles. Oh yeah, and there's a harder version of Wham Bam Rock, I guess? With these new tougher bosses, there's now another mainstay to the Kirby postgame, the True Arena. Fight every new boss in a row with even fewer or outright weaker healing items, and rematch with a harder version of the main game's final boss. This mode will truly test your endurance. Nearly a decade after a main Kirby game, ignoring Superstar Ultra, Kirby finally returns to his roots, to Dreamland, if you will. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm not real fond of this game's post-game content. Sure, you got yourself the arena, but then you got Extra Mode. What sort of twist does Extra Mode provide? Well, the bosses are a different color and are harder to fight, so that's something. Oh, and this one boss has an extra phase that calls back to the time it was supposed to be a Superstar-like game on GameCube. Oh, and the enemies can be huge at random, or that the key segments are more annoying. Your health is halved too. Other than that, you're basically playing the entire game again. They didn't even change where you find the collectibles. The only reason you'd want to beat this mode at all is to access the true arena. But even then, something just doesn't feel right here either. Probably because Galactonite is sort of just there for some reason. I don't know. After that somewhat embarrassing reward for being the story, you got the 3DS duology. These games play out the same formula, so I'll make it quick. After being the story, other than your obligatory arena mode, the time attack modes return once again, but with some twists. First off, this is actually extra mode all along. The bosses you fight are tougher and look different, and the enemies come in random sizes now, like before. Second off, they have their own special gimmicks. Dedede Tour of Triple Deluxe has you play as Dedede, and unlike Hammer Kirby, this penguin is built to solve basically any puzzle he comes by. Exclusive to this mode are wormholes, which are shortcuts that help you save that sweet, sweet time. In Planet Robobot, Metaknightmare returns. That's what it's actually called. Just like Superstar Ultra, you need to defeat enemies to earn points that you can use on 4 special abilities. Third off, there's quite a few extra bosses to fight at the end. Oh, not to mention that at this point in the Kirby series, lore has been better fleshed out. Whenever you pause during fights, you get a description of the boss you're facing. While the story modes just have simple bios for these bosses, the extra modes' tougher variants have a chance of further expanding on their stories. And with new bosses come the true arenas, as well as the return of the exclusive final boss soul fights. The 3DS games have a fairly decent set of post-game content, and is definitely better than what Return to Dreamland had. I mean, that's it, right? There's nothing else we can do.
Kirby Star Allies!
Okay, sure, the story mode's levels are not the best compared to the previous games, but where it falls flat on its first impression, it makes up for it with its unbelievably robust post-game content. Sure, you probably should have had story mode be as good as this, but it is what it is. Anyways, hey, remember Helper to Hero and being able to see the time score of each helper you play as? Okay, imagine that coming back to the arena. Cool. Now, imagine that being part of the new time attack mode. Guessed, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, Star Allies, go! This single mode, as well as the game's arena, is why I have 210 plus hours of game time on it. It's that replayable. Of course, I got to explain what this mode offers that the previous ones don't. Not only are you playing a shorter version of the story mode, but this mode's gimmick revolves around collecting these power-up hearts to boost health, power, and speed. While it does make boss fights super easy at the end, it's still satisfying to progress your stats. This isn't even mentioning the Dream Friends that you can play as well. Starting from the animal buddies and onwards, these special characters have levels exclusive to them. Play as Marks and you may be sent to a short remake of a few levels from Superstar. Play as Adeline and have a rematch with the familiar boss variants of regular enemies. Play as Magolor and you will be treated with both Return to Dreamland levels and even brief segments into another dimension. When you play as Dream Friends, expect a lot of fan service. Oh, and there's a new final boss waiting at the end for you, Morpho-Knight. They're the new Galactonite, but cooler. They may even be death itself, but at the time we did not know much of the character. But what I do know is that they're too darn easy to beat, especially since you'd be having attack level 4 or max at that point of the game. Oh hey, I should talk about the ultimate choice. It's fine, but it's certainly a weird approach to the arena. Unlike last time where you choose between just easy or just hard, now you can adjust that difficulty a bit more. But the trade-off is that easier difficulties actually lessen the amount of bosses you fight. Other than that, this is a more fleshed out version of Helper to Hero. Okay, surely that's it. There's nothing else to be added at this point, right? I mean, Wave 3 is just gonna have 3 additional 3 friends to play as. I'm sure there's no
Heroes in another dimension!
Okay, do you not like how story mode levels felt empty and often lacked purpose? Do you miss having collectibles? In this new mode, you must put your Kirby gameplay experience to the test as you collect as much hearts as you can to hopefully save the villain Highness from his own corruption. Not only is this mode harder than story mode or guest star, but there's even harder versions of main bosses here as well. My one critique with this mode though is that despite this greatly concentrated level design going on, the actual aesthetic of the levels themselves aren't remarkable. It's just the same purple and blinding yellow ground all the way through, if only each world had its own identity to them. This mode not only has a major impact as to how post-games should be approached in later games, but it also had a great impact on the canon as well, for stuff like Dedede Tour and Metaknightmare and Guest Star to some extent. Basically, these modes are not canon. Sure, they can help develop the backstories of major characters, but otherwise, these made-up scenarios don't leave much of an impact to the original game's story. Here, Heroes in Another Dimension is a sort of sequel to story mode. Not only does it further develop the Jamba cult, but it even gives them the conclusion they desperately needed after they mysteriously disappeared after the initial fight with Void Termina. Really, this mode is a game changer in the Kirby postgame, and we'll see it be expanded in the next entry. Kirby in the Forgotten Land revisits Hiad's ideas of saving someone from corruption. To save Leongar from Ephilus's possession, you must visit the dream dimension Forgo Dreams and collect the souls scattered all over. This new world is a spiritual successor to Extra Mode, as you will play a harder version of the main story, albeit a short version of it. Instead of replacing every Waddle Dee with a soul, these soul pieces are found in completely different areas. At times, you need to pay close attention or else you'll miss them. This makes what otherwise would be hard mode into a different thing entirely, with altered levels, more enemies to encounter, and even brand new levels in between. What makes this sort of post-game even better is that it's just more organic than prior games. Sure, a pop-up telling you that extra mode exists can get the job done, but nothing beats the surprise of suddenly being sucked by a rip in space-time. Sadly, Forgotten Land does not have a time attack mode that previous other games have. While I do understand why that is, it's a little sad to have this mainstay edition be left out. But thankfully, Forgotten Land is replayable enough as to make this absence not as bad. So at this point, we got a sort of new post-game formula going on here. So how is Kirby going to handle it on their next entry? Kirby Returns to Dreamland Deluxe. It's a pretty great remake. It brings in all of the quality of life changes that the 3DS games have. Beautiful stylized graphics, some brand new abilities, and 10 sub-games. But what about the post-game? Did they do anything to address its flaws? Sadly, for extra mode, there's absolutely nothing new here. It's the same darn thing as the original, down to needing to recollect the same collectibles once again. The only reason you want to beat this mode is to unlock the true arena, but for some reason, it's not unlocking. Why? 2 words. Magolor Epilogue. Continuing on with the likes of Heroes in Another Dimension and Forgo Dreams, is another canonical post-game mode. Unlike the others though, this is an entirely different game, with systems only found in this mode. After being punished for his betrayal, Magolor winds up in a sort of limbo-like dimension, having lost his powers in the process. To return to Dreamland, Magolor must collect magic points to regain his strength, as well as rebuild the Gem Apple to finally come home. This is an incredibly satisfying and fun game mode, with a combo system that rewards you with tons of magic points if you keep them up. Magic points that you spend to regain and refine your powers. Oh, and each level gives you a rank based on your combo performance, which is nice. What's also nice is that it finally tells us what happened to Magolor. When Return to Dreamland released, we'd assumed that he died. I mean, we killed his soul. I mean, he's not coming back, right? But it took until the 20th anniversary Dream Collection to confirm that somehow Magolor survived. But it was just confirmed through an aside comment, and people most likely would have missed out on this tidbit. So it's great to finally have an upfront and engaging confirmation on Magolor's fate. The cool thing about Magolor Epilogue is that, aside from short challenge stages, you can beat the entire game without making a single upgrade. If you feel daring, try beating this mode without spending a single point. It's quite tough. Okay, so you finally collect all the food fragments. Now I guess it's the part where Morphinite comes in and fight, right? Oh wait, what's that? Crown Doomer? Okay then, pleasant surprise. Okay, surely there's more to this. Alright, finally got that taken care of. Hey, the true arena is finally unlocked. Oh wait, I had to beat 2 modes just to unlock this. So that means... oh boy. So basically, this remake's true arena is significantly harder. Not just because there's 5 additional bosses, not just because Galactonite is still there, not even because these additional bosses make the 3 tomatoes more valuable, but because they completely changed the Magolor Soul fight. Okay, so you thought that Magolor Soul was going to play the same as he did in Extra Mode, right? Too bad, double laser. Oh, you thought you've defeated him? Here's an apple, because now comes round 2. Personally, not only is this the longest arena out of the modern Kirby games, but also perhaps one of the hardest to date. I worry what potential remakes will be like if they take this approach. So that leaves us with the question, how are they going to top this off? Well, obviously we don't know yet, but there is potential. Post-game modes have been proven to be a pretty good way of not only continuing the story, but also further developing characters and the lore behind them. If a remake for 3DS games comes out in the future, don't be surprised if they got post-game modes centered around Taranza or Susie, because they desperately need development and conclusion. Of course, given they'll even make such post-game content for them. Either way, I can't wait to see how they'll approach it on their next games.